Welcome to another episode of the Hospitality Mentor Podcast. And today I'm very excited for this one. I've got my longtime friend, Brett Friedman, founder of A21. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Good to see you, bud.
It's good to see you. And listeners, we were just talking backstage. I think we rescheduled this like 8 times. All right, I've had CEOs of major hotel companies on here, and now we got him. We got Brett locked
Just a
in here.
little bit of Jewish guilt. I mean, it just worked perfectly, and that's very on brand for me. So that'll be the narrative throughout the entire interview.
I love it. And so, listen, Brett, before we jump into the first question, I want you to give like a little 30-second download of what A21 is for those that don't.
Sure. So A21 is a 19-year-old company that I founded in 2006. It's an events platform, experiential marketing firm. We are a Miami-based company, but we also have offices in Miami, New York, and London, and then satellite personnel in Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Denver, Chicago. And when we're done by the end of this year, we're adding at least a 20% increase to our workforce. So we'll be adding some other key personnel really throughout the country. And then as we expand internationally, that'll be more and more of an emphasis.
It's amazing.
But
I
yeah,
love
we're
it. It's awesome. It's awesome. And I'm excited to talk about this growth because it's amazing what you've created.
Thank you.
We got to start from the very beginning. What was your first job in hospitality?
Technically speaking, my first job, I delivered pizzas in college, and I'm actually quite proud of that because, I think a lot of people just think kind of, you go to college and, fortunate mom and dad help you. And I was all those things. But I've always had this kind of just drive to work, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when you attend the University of Florida, one of the dream jobs is actually being a pizza delivery guy, especially back then. You can use your imagination for some of the ways people like to tip you. But it was an amazing experience. I did it for 18 months, my freshman into a little bit of my sophomore year. So that was my first kind of onset into the hospitality world. Not glamorous, sweaty t-shirt, late night kind of living, which I think anybody in this industry can understand or relate to. And then it's really this fast forward into my time at Zoe's. And that's really kind of when I got into the event business. And then when I launched the agency and we get into the culinary business is really the first time I really dive into the hospitality.
I like it. So I want to reverse backwards even earlier because
sure.
You've got something special that I have too. Like we are local Miamians, actually born here. And I know that's something you're proud of. So you're, I think, what, third or fourth generation?
Third generation. Grandfather moved here to go to the University of Miami when he was 16 in the mid 30s.
Wow.
And we never left. So I am incredibly proud of that. I love this city. As I like to say, I was born here and I will die here proudly. But even more proudly, I like to say that my son is fourth generation. So that's the legacy.
So where did you grow up down here? Where did you go to high school?
Well, I went to NMB. I grew up in North Miami Beach. Everyone kind of affectionately or not affectionately refers to it as Aventura.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up. My dad grew up in Coral Gables and my mom grew up in North Miami Beach when she moved here from Jersey in the early 60s. So that's the lineage.
Look at this connection here. I love it. So you're growing up, you're playing sports, you're an athlete. That's probably the dream. It was not getting into events, Jewish athlete. There's some of us out there. I was a Jewish athlete at Killian. We played basketball, or some out there.
Mine was baseball, but I hear you.
But was hospitality even on the radar at all?
No. I was just a finance kid. I mean, I have a master's in finance. That is what I was supposed to do. But life takes you on weird journeys. I actually started my first company in college. It was called Campus Coupons. Then it turned into something called FundU.com that went through several rounds of angel financing, millions of dollars, actually went pre-IPO when I was a genius. And then guess what? I was an idiot and I had to fire everybody and I was unemployed. But so I never, to be fair and candid, hospitality was never like the path. I have to give Lee credit for that, I guess, as I stumbled into the Food Network South Beach Wine and Food Festival in 2006. So that is what started me on this hospitality journey that I am incredibly proud to be a part of. I take it very seriously. and passionate about the space. And I kind of look at it as I'm just part of the journey. that I've inherited from generations before. So yeah, it's a later in my life that I fell into hospitality, I guess, technically speaking, but hard to be more passionate about a space than I am.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you start getting into it, because you have a couple of stops before you create your company.
Yeah,
So talk about that. I think you were at, working for Miami Herald for a little bit.
correct.
Was
So
it
when
correct?
my first company closed, I was fortunate I kind of went around things backwards, right? I kind of went the entrepreneurial route initially. And then when you're unemployed and you're like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, what's next? I thought I was so smart. I actually got a job at Knight Ridder in their shared services division, which was basically did huge contract negotiations. Actually, my largest contract negotiation at that time was $1 billion. I'm 24 years old,
Yeah, 24-year-old doing.
negotiating 9-figure deals at a minimum. I was the youngest in the division by I think it was 13 years. And I had a very fast track within Knight Ridder, but it was just not for me. That big corporate lifestyle, ironically, considering how many corporate partners we work with today, it was just not made for me. So I was very fortunate to get a job with Alonzo Mourning, working with him, running his foundation, which at the time was Summer Groove, and then eventually kind of got rolled into something called Alonzo Mourning Charities. And I just loved it again. This local kid, this local connection to the
Miami
Heat.
Heat, yeah.
So
So how does that happen, right? So you're doing this because that's
Mhm.
probably a dream, right? You got Alonzo Mourning, especially a
Total
Miami
dream.
guy like us. Like, he's one of our idols here growing up in Miami. He left for a little bit, came back. So Summer Groove, I went to a bunch of them. What were you doing? Like, how did you get in there to
So
start?
it's just kind of, I would say Bashert, which you understand, but it's just fortuitous. So a gentleman that I had met during my first company when we were raising capital ended up being his financial advisor, Alan First. Alan eventually became my business partner. So Alan is still Zoe's business manager to this day. Alan and I kept in touch and reached out to me. Again, I'm 24 years old at the time. It's got to be 2001-ish, and offers me the job. And so I worked with Alan. And so Alan and I ran this foundation. I was, if I remember correctly, I was the only white person in the company at the time, which was an interesting kind of reflection coming from an incredibly liberal household, kind of feeling that reverse situation that so many people have to endure. And I had never. So it was actually a wonderful kind of learning lesson for me. And then working underneath and with Alonzo, who was this titan, especially then, self-made, foster child, which a lot of people don't know about him.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Kidney issues come later in his life, and then of course being around with him as he fights through that challenge. Oh, you'll never hear me say anything, but Alonzo Mourning is one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. Just a super hardworking, dedicated, driven human, like driven to at a level I don't think that I could ever accomplish. And then of course having Alan as my boss and then eventual partner, just a great human being. While we're not partners anymore, he is still a friend and someone that I have a great deal of respect for. But that's what got me into the event world, right? I
That's
did for
cool. Yeah, you're
4
there.
years, got the bug. I loved it.
So you had that entrepreneurial itch earlier, right? Like, you had started a couple of companies. So were you thinking that the whole time, or you're like, man, I'm done
Totally.
being an entrepreneur. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, when I took the job, I remember saying to Alan, I'm only going to be here for like a year because I'm just trying to figure out what my next company is. A year turned into a little bit over 4 years. And the whole time, I'm kind of like planning what this next business is. And I fell in love with what I did for Alonzo, which was producing these first class high end events. That's really, if you break it down to the rudimentary aspect of what I did with Zoe, is we created very high end events. And so I fell in love with it. And so we launched A21. It was at that time called EDC 21 Consulting. It was supposed to be a sports marketing company. That is what we were going to do. We were going to replicate what we did with Zoe all over the country with other sports athletes. And the irony of that is we almost do zero sports today
Yeah.
and almost all culinary and art. Because as you know, my first client becomes Lee in the Food Network South Beach Wine and Food Festival. And
Yeah, so I want to get to this, right? Because there's a lot of people, they're sitting in their job right now. They have this idea. I want to be a business owner.
sure.
They've talked about it. They sit in the employee cafeteria or wherever they're at with their team, but you actually go ahead and do it, right? And so it's a difference. So how do you create A21? Because did you have clients lined up? Did you know you had something already ready to go? Or did you just quit and say, I'm going to figure it out as I fly off the mountain here?
To know me is to know that is 90% of my DNA. At the time, Alonzo was my first client, so it was kind of fortuitous. And he was very supportive in the early onset of that. But I'm a risk taker. You have to be a risk taker as an entrepreneur, which I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur at this point, even though I've been at A21 for almost 20 years. I do have another company, Smush Hospitality, which we can talk on later.
Yep.
But you have to just have this belief in yourself, which if anybody knows me, they know that I just have this eternal flame that drives me to win, not at other people's cost. It's to win and do it the right way, which I take a great deal of pride in.
Yep.
And so, yeah, at 27, 28 years old, no fear in the world whatsoever still for me. I remember working with a lot of my wonderful colleagues at Night Rider, and they couldn't understand how I was built, right? Because they had families and they had kids and they could not afford to take a risk. And to this day, 48 with a wife and a kid, I would still give the same advice. Without it, you never achieve anything great. And so that's the whole reason that I'm wired the way I am and why I preach it to my son so much.
Yeah, I love that. I'm fired up already talking to you. So you start A21, you have technically a client in Zoe, right?
Correct.
And so
it became very short-lived, but yes, technically I did. But anyway, keep going.
So you start to look around. You're looking around. All right, how am I going to get some new leads here? I'm guessing you probably pitched to other athletes and maybe it didn't go as well. How did this turn into you reaching out to Lee Schrager and turning this into that part?
So very quickly, like everybody, I sent out this mass email.
Yeah.
And so what you probably, or you may not know, is I've known Lee since I was a kid, like 13, 15 years old, because one of Lee's best friends is this woman named Susan Kleinberg. Susan, who's been in the industry forever. You know Susan, right? Always produced the Lowe's events, the tribute.
Yep, I know her.
Susan's my godmother.
A small world.
So again, if you know Lee, you have to know that almost everybody in his world, he's a very loyal guy, is through his personal network and web. So Lee and I had worked together at Zoe's. Southern had always supported the event financially and done all of our wine and spirits. So I'd be in Lee's office all the time, right? And back then, I think the festival was 2 years old, right? It just moved over to the beach. And so I sent out this email, and I'll never forget it. Lee, he summons me to his office. And I remember Kimberly Spence and Lori Ann, who are two of the pivotal people that really are the backbone of the festival at that time. We're sitting in this huge, oak table. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Screw this company of yours, come join me." And I said something along the lines of, "Why don't you just hire me?"
Yes.
And
good move.
This was my 20th anniversary with the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. I'm proud that our company is the agency of record and has been ever since.
It's amazing. So again, all right. So now we know the connection, but you still got to perform. You still got to do a good job.
That's a
right?
fact. So for that man, there is no question.
Yes, I've worked with him, but in the hotel side. So what was it like that first year? Did you have a lot of pressure on yourself, or you're built for this?
And I'm built for it. I mean, we had success almost out of the gate. Truthfully, Publix was a big partner. I'll never forget Bill Fauerbach and Gary Carell, dear friends and partners over at Zoe's, immediately came on board. Lee and I had a natural synergistic way of looking at partnerships, which is what my primary job was. And so what I did, which really helped transform what he had created for the festivals, was this partnership size, because other than me, it had always been him. And so we took a little bit of the knowledge I had learned at my time with Zoe's, which was really a sports model, and we replicated it into culinary. And
so what is that model for listeners that don't know? Give them
sure. Well, so if you've ever worked with the Miami Dolphins or the Heat, which I was very fortunate to work with both, right? So everything is about this kind of value-added service, right? It's a little bit of what we refer to as consultative selling. So it's not, here is what you get. It's, what do you want? What are your goals? What's your objectives? So it's a very different approach than most people take. And now, while the sports model, you can get 2, 3, 4, 10x on the deals that we're getting. The reality is what they do is very bespoke and customized. How much media is important, how much on stadium is important. So we learned that, and that's what we applied to this festival that Lee, to his credit, right, other than Aspen, had not been taking place anywhere in the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And he really had this perfect storm of Miami growing up, as you and I know, right? Basel gets launched right at the same time as he does. So both of these huge anchor events are kind of simultaneously coming into the landscape, which has changed the narrative of Miami from this sleepy town, even though it was a huge city still then, into this mecca that everyone was paying attention to. And he did it for the culinary world. And as you know, and I certainly do, we've all copied it ever since. There's something like several thousand culinary events that take place in one iteration or another. They're really all copies in one way or another, I've said affectionately, of both the Aspen Classic and the South Beach Wine and Food Festival.
It's true. So when do you start now? So you've been doing this 20 years. When do you start layering in some of your own events? Because now you produce your events, you create events that people come to, you own these events. How did you start adding that in?
So by COVID, we had already become the largest culinary events agency in the country. We were producing more shows than basically everybody. What happens post-COVID is this Phoenix kind of moment. I really refer to A21, or as, again, it used to be Agency 21 Consulting. We're now A21. That's how we refer to ourselves.
A21.
Or 2.0. And so the reality is we come out of it and we become very public facing. So we were a white label agency. You would never hear me doing any sort of interviews, press clippings, anything of that nature. But, what we started to do is actually double down and take even more risk. Not a shock. Again, if you know me at my core, my former partner was risk averse, right? He really loved kind of the system that made us very successful to that, how it was to that day. Post-COVID, I saw this wonderful opportunity, right? Everything kind of imploded, as we all know. We all went through this kind of dire, weird kind of soul searching in our own ways. About 6 months in, after I drank the last bottle of whiskey I had in my house, it was really simple. I just decided nothing's going to beat me. We're not going to go down like that. And a lot of my amazing friends and colleagues who stuck around, right? The company went from 36 people at the time down to eight people who were making a fraction of their salary, who said, we're in it to win it. We're sticking. Fast forward, we're almost 100 people today. And so we rebuilt this company to be public facing, to be a little bit more about us, and wait till you see the future version of us and the rapid growth that we're about to undertake. But yeah, we decided to start owning some of our assets and to acquire as many of the assets and do as much vertical integration as we possibly could. So that is what happened. It really was kind of a post-COVID analysis of the business and an analysis of the opportunity, and then just a kind of pedal to the metal approach.
All right. So for people that don't know events, right, I can understand the backbone of it. Why is it different for you to start and important for you to own yours versus produce other people's things?
It's the upside, right? It's really just that simple. Whether we manage or own, control is at the forefront of any event producer, right? So let's just break it down to the most benign. You need control. Why? Because every single time you relinquish that to another entity, you don't have the final say over how XYZ is to be delivered. Now, listen, it takes a village, as they say. Just like raising a kid takes a village. To produce an event, there's hundreds of people that are behind it. Many of them don't ever get the proper credit that they deserve because of the man hours they put into it. But control, because if you're going to put your name and reputation behind something, you want to have the final say on a direction, or if a corporate partner is involved, you want to have control over ensuring this part of the plan, that part of their contract, activation plans, locations, so on and so forth. So besides the upside, financially speaking, it's really a control issue, right? In order to achieve greatness, in order to have a first-class event, in order to have consistency that is sustainable, you need control. And so that's part of the reason you start to get into the owned assets. Not to mention, as you're building a larger company, which is what we're doing here, the book value on an owned asset versus the book value on a managed asset, you're talking about a 2-3x on a managed, you're talking about a 10x on an owned. So incredibly values, you're creating a book value for a company.
Yes. And so what I realized, and a lot of people didn't know, is that a lot of people build conferences and events to sell them. Is that something that you're looking to do, or are you looking to continue building on top of these? And I have some questions after.
At 48 years old, I've gone up, down, sideways on that subject. And as I mentioned already, someone who is an entrepreneur who has other passions, not anytime soon would be the answer, right? I've got 2.5 more beautiful years before my son goes to college. And then the reality is I'm just going to work more. So, I have no intentions of slowing down. I see the opportunity in front of us. We have a wonderful team of talented people that every day we keep adding more. I love teaching them. I find them inspiring. Hopefully I'm inspiring back. But I'm incredibly passionate to just keep doing more. And what's happening, Steve, as you see, the more that we're out there, the more these opportunities seem to come to us.
Yeah.
Whether it's my personality and that, magnetic kind of approach, or this company's. I think it's this company's because yes, they're an extension of me, but I'm equally an extension of them. So the answer is, yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
No, and I love it. And you mentioned something because you're going out there more. Like you said, you were not out there all the time.
Correct.
Now you're putting your face out there. I see your team sharing things on social media, especially on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, I know the Hate 2-1. Like, that's cool to see like his team members posting things that they're proud of. And so it must make you proud when you see this team that you're building, like sharing this and the wins. Do you encourage team to share stuff online?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, you're only as good as they are. And so the reality is I get all the credit and all the blame, no matter what happens, but that's unfortunate. These beautiful young minds that I get to stare at, talk to, and work with every single day. That's part of the reason I love what I do so much. They truly are part of the motivation to do more, right? Because they're kind of sponges. They feel this energy. We constantly say to people when we're hiring them, if you're looking for a job, it's the wrong place. This is a lifestyle. You have to love it, right? And if you love it, you will have best friends for your entire life. There are examples after examples where people come in here and the next day they're just immersed in the culture. And culture is a word that I am incredibly passionate about. I think a lot of people throw it around so loosely. It is something that we live by. We care about our people. I do look at them all as an extension of my family. You could interview anyone that works in this company and they will tell you that they know me personally, that they can come talk to me. That is not something I take lightly. We invest in that. We want to be a company that believes in their people, supports their people, and invest in their people. So that is what we are, and that's what we believe.
That's great. Great advice for any listener out there. Rewind that last 30 seconds, just because if you're building a company out there, that's the kind of passion you want for your team and building that culture.
I think people take it for granted.
Yeah, they do.
I never will. And, you and I can go back, as I think everybody should, and reflect on COVID, where something was taken away from me that was out of my control. And what I learned, one of the first things I ever did, I remember, is I changed our healthcare from an HMO to a PPO. Why? Because I didn't want people to ever worry about healthcare again, right? So there's certain values you have to have as a human with your colleagues and your employees. And it's something we'll never deviate from, ever. Not while I sit in this seat.
See, because you lead with integrity, which a lot of people don't have. So that's what you got out there. So as you're doing this, I want to rewind a little bit, something a little bit different. Let's say there's a listener out there. They really dream about being the next, leader of an agency that produces events. Sure. If you were going to start an event from scratch, what is some advice you would give people, right? Because I've been dabbling some events. I've been doing some networking events, had 150 people there, some sponsors, but all right, we want to take it to the next level. What advice?
Well, a lot of telling you don't do it.
You can say that. You could say.
Listen, you have to start with a core conviction. I mean, it is not easy. Like that question has been asked to me 1,001 different ways.
Okay.
You will lose money.
Right. You put a lot of money up front.
The volume of hours you invest into an event, you will never see the return. It's actually a terrible business. You have to love it. So you have to ask yourself, why am I doing it? Right? Is it altruistic? Is it to make money? Is it because I care about my mom, sisters, aunts, cousins, foundation? So you have to really break it down to the core. Why are you doing it? What is making you work so damn hard to win? You'll hear me always reference things in that kind of benign, simplistic nature, winning and losing.
Yep.
And so the answer is that's part of that core, right? That fire I referred to earlier. You have to just have conviction in it, whatever it is. Let's go back to Lee for a second. What a madman. He was creating a food festival in Miami. There was no precedent other than Aspen, and Aspen's like 3,000 people, in the summer, and it comes and it goes, right? He had conviction, he had an idea, and he outworked everybody. Whether I learned that from him or I learned it from mom and dad, maybe a little bit of both, right? The reality is I just outwork everybody. And so that is what I would tell anybody is what's the reason? How passionate and how driven are you for it? And just accept that you are going to have to work so damn hard and you're going to have to love it even when you're miserable. Which ends to be one of the most rewarding things you ever do in your life.
Yeah.
And then the sad part, it's the most anticlimactic business there is because then it just ends.
Once it's done, you're like, where's the next one?
Oh, shit. Well, in my life, where we do 240 around the world, and it literally is, okay, where am I going next? What plane? Where am I going?
That's incredible. That's a giant number. So let's talk about that. You're producing all these events, okay? You gave good advice there. Make sure you're passionate. How are you able to do this, right? You went from 8 people to now over 100. You're still hiring. You've got some great things that you secured. I want to talk about the Pebble Beach and some other stuff that you've done. How are you doing all this, right? Because this is a crazy number when you hear this.
I have a very supportive spouse.
Yeah.
Very supportive kid. I'm a little bit of a lunatic.
Because I've seen you during the events, okay? And you're on fire. You're in fuego. You're running around. You're shaking hands. You're making deal. I see you when it was going on. I still see it every year.
But what I hope you also see is me usually smiling.
You're smiling, yeah. And you engage with somebody. You look me straight in the eye every time you saw me at those things, and you're engaging and you're shaking hands. And
because I actually like people. And that's a rare quality I've learned, something that I've almost taken for granted my entire life is that I genuinely like to talk to you. And I enjoy that 5-second moment of catching up, whatever it is. Most people don't, right? Most people are in and out of a conversation. It's more of a nuisance than it is enjoyable. It's enjoyable for me. So that makes it easier. How do I do it? I have an amazing team. I keep referencing that. I've got some amazing people. Maya Holmquist, Anthony Gordon, Maribel Chalua, Chris Moon, who just joined us, actually, former president of James Beard Foundation, just joined us. These people, my assistant, Andrea, Jesus, God bless her.
Yeah, that's the hardest job.
No question. Andrea definitely has the hardest job in the company. These people help navigate my life with me. But again, I have this commitment to outwork everybody. And that's really what it comes down to. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not sitting here like a slave driver saying you need to be at the office for 110 hours a week. That's a bunch of bullshit. I don't believe in that. Pardon.
That's all right. All good. This is real life.
I actually don't believe in that because I actually think that if you don't have time for your family, then you don't actually have time for yourself and you can't be the best version of yourself. But you have to want to be great, which I do. And you have to want and be surrounded by people who want to be great, not just average. Who needs average?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what drives me. And the more we do, the more driven I am, if that makes any sense, right?
It does. Yeah.
So
you keep stacking wins. You keep doing great things. You keep doing bigger and bigger events. So why don't you talk to me about this, of what's coming up, right? Because you did a lot in the last year. What is happening now? Because you are launching some different things. Sure. Give us the update. What's going on in 2025? Like, we don't need the 5-year plan, but like,
I was just going to say, I don't know how much time you have, right? Do we have 2 hours?
We got plenty of time, but give us some things you're really excited about.
Well, listen, South Beach kind of kicks off the season, right? Which it just completed and probably was its most successful version to date. For us, we're launching a new project in Puerto Rico the first week of April, which we're proud of. Again, it's part of our international expansion, which is just at its early onset. We do have Pebble Beach coming back, our second year running Pebble Beach. I think Pebble is the most prestigious, certainly from a wine, spirits, and culinary initiative. I would put it next to almost any event in the country. It's something I'm incredibly proud of, something that we took over in an RFP process in 2022. And it is just beginning this beautiful climb. And if you look at the culinary talent that is participating year over year. Again, next to South Beach, I would put us next to anybody in the country. As far as a wine program, next to the New York Wine Experience or La Palais, I think we're right there. And so incredibly proud of that. I have worked for the last 18 years to penetrate the wine world. Not an easy world to penetrate. They are not always the most inviting of environments, but a lot of pride in that. And I've been collecting and have been to hundreds of wineries in order to achieve that. So Pebble really is a reflection of that work. And it properly kind of highlights how special of a peninsula it is. And it all benefits the Pebble Beach Foundation. So we're very proud of that project, as I think the team should be. A lot of man hours go into that being successful. We have now acquired the LA Wine and Food Festival, which will take place in November this year. And incredibly fortunate to announce that I can't divulge because the press release has to come out. Right. Some new initiatives we're doing with Mr. Schrager, which we're very proud of.
That's very exciting. You got me all hyped up now here. It's something that just hit me as you're talking, because I actually never knew the answer to this. Are the talent that's coming, are they getting paid, or this is all them showing up and doing marketing and promotions?
It depends on the event, to be fair, right? And it can be a sore subject depending on who, right? Because their time is worth something and they're incredibly larger than life figures. But for South Beach and New York, they are donating their time completely to benefit the charities that those two events are benefiting.
Amazing.
Case by case, depending on the other event. We'll leave that benign, right? But yes. The answer is, listen, talent does work incredibly hard, do deserve to be paid one way or another, however it is, whether it's endorsement deals or corporate initiatives that we work with. And we take that seriously and we try our hardest to ensure one way or another that we're working with them, not against them, for all the things they do to make us successful.
I like it. So you're doing a ton of your own events. Great. Are there other events that you see like, wow, they've done that really well, that maybe you learned from or you keep an eye on? Who do you see out there that's something maybe that is worth checking?
I went to Bottle Rock last year. So we're not in the music space. We've been involved in Sunfest for years. And so we went out to Bottle Rock because we're launching a new initiative in 2026 in Cape Cod, and a music festival on Cape Cod.
Cool.
And so we went to see it, and I was blown away because they have an entire culinary pavilion in there with Andrew Zimmern and, I'm blanking on all the personalities they had. Jose Andres was involved as well, but they had 26 different access points. So you're Joe consumer, you have an RFID band, and you had to check in depending on what you paid for. And these huge, massive kind of amphitheater-like, seating that they bring in. It's definitely one of the more impressive things I've attended. I don't attend many events that aren't my own, but I did that as a research and reconnaissance mission. Also an interesting one, I attended Tales of the Cocktail for the first time last year.
Okay.
I would say it's not what I expected it to be, but from a mixology component, it was super eye-opening, right? I think that it's a part of the industry that I don't think gets enough credit. And so I was really appreciative to see it. And it was great for me to kind of hang out with some people that I very rarely get to have real, genuine time with.
Yep.
You can imagine, Steve, I don't ever sit still. So for me to go to an event and actually invest 36 to 48 hours is incredibly rare. And I was able to do that at Tales. And I really walked away kind of like a newfound appreciation for that space specifically.
And those bartenders are very passionate, and they would hate me calling. They can want to be called mixologists. I don't know the right term for them anymore.
It does get confusing.
Right? Some of them like mixologists, others don't. You got to be careful because they might come after me here. So, look, you've given us a lot of time here. You shared a lot of great information. But if you could go back to young Brett coming out of University of Florida and whisper in his ear, and he was starting on your team today, what advice are you giving him?
Love what you do is something that I think that when you're young and impressionable, you don't always kind of take it, appreciate it. And whatever your end game is, it always takes longer than you think. Again, I had a taste of success very early, whether it jaded me or not. I just always thought things would happen quicker. Yep. And the reality is they take much longer. I watched my parents, two of the hardest working, respectable, ethical people I've ever known, two of the greatest people I've ever known. And I realize I'm biased, but it's the truth. They've just worked hard every day for the single. No
Yep.
home runs, their entire careers, right? And they've had the most beautiful life ever. And that's, yeah, I admire that. So I think what I would remind that not punk of a kid, but that cocky kid, right, who still
Mhm.
lives inside me today,
Yeah.
the journey is long, not short. Um, Stay committed to yourself, be true to yourself. Mm, There are no corners to cut. Just stay on it, working your butt off, and do it the right way. I mean, I'm giving a few examples of what I would teach that kid, but that
Yep.
kid knew then what it took, right? Which is a lot of work, a lot of hard work, and a lot of really dear friends to help you along the way, because you need a lot of luck and friends help you get there.
Love that. Yeah, I'm fired up here today, Brett. You got me fired up.
That's the
So
goal.
for listeners, look, you just heard some amazing advice from someone who creates some of the best events in the world and is only creating better and better things. I'm excited to hear what you're about to announce. But if you haven't yet and you're not driving, pause this, check out A21's website. They're doing some amazing things. You get to see the whole team there, all the fun events that they're putting together. And if you learn something from this, I'm sure one of your friends would too. So make sure to forward this episode to them right now. Take that second, pause this, send it off to one of your friends. Brett, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate
Anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
Joe, I'm supporting you. I'm proud of you, and I appreciate you taking the time to include me. And I look for our next journey together, bud.